Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of questionable parentage, it is your homeboy, CaptNRetro, and his homeboy, EmceeMur, and we are here again live for you with another episode of Talking Retro, the best podcast ever made by anyone ever on the planet.
That makes me laugh every time.
I try and do a little bit different than the, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all age. I came up with my own version of it. That's what you do, right? You make your own thing out of stuff.
Yeah.
So we are live, and we're going to have a special guest. He is running a little bit late tonight, which is totally fine. He was here last week, so if you watch last week's podcast, it's Ian from the HistoricNerd, and eventually he will be online with us. It'll be terrific. Hooray for us. Murr, what's going on, buddy? How you been?
Busier than a $2 hooker at a Hell's Angel reunion. Just lots of stuff going on, lots of stuff coming to the show.
That's busy, is what that is.
It is.
Wow.
And, just not enough time to see to all of it, but we're trying to get on more of a consistent upload schedule with these new additions to the lineup. I want people to be able to anticipate when they can see new episodes of these things, assuming they do actually want to see them. So lots to do.
Well, I was digging the new show you put up, the receipts show. What's impressive is not only your personal collection, but that you saved your fucking receipts, which is, who does that other than like accountants?
I mean, I almost kind of forgot I did. And every few years I'll find them and like, oh yeah, I still have these. And then I'll just put them right back up. But they've survived 7 moves. So they're never where I think they are. And then I found them in the garage not too long ago, but boom. I mean, there they were. And man, I'm not the only one that might want to take a look at these. This is just something that I genuinely wanted to share with everybody. And if they care about it, great. We'll keep on talking about it. And I think everybody is genuinely interested in it. That the first episode was kind of a feel out. It's by no means the heaviest hitters that you're going to see in this series. It was pretty much some basic purchases. And it's interesting to look at because some of these, it's like, Murr, you're this retro gamer, right? You're the man. You've done all this. You've been doing it since 85, right? Why are you buying Mega Man and stuff like this in 1997? This looks weird. And I almost asked myself that question, like, really? I didn't get that game till 1996, but we've talked about this. I was a Sega household. You were a Nintendo household. I would trade my Sega out to people, and I would get an NES for the week, and we did that, and we'd babysit each other's systems for a week, sometimes for a month, and that's how I cut my Nintendo teeth. I mean, I didn't own one, but when I had one, and you know this as well as I, you could always kick up to your local grocery store video rental dump and get any game you wanted for 99 cents. So that's how I played most of those classic NES titles. But I didn't actually own copies of them until much later when I had the actual collection going, from the mid-90s and later. So I'm kind of almost checking myself when I'm looking at these, like, really? I didn't buy that till 1996? But then it makes sense why I had played it so much up until that point, not actually having owned a physical copy. It's almost clearing up memories for me about how I came into certain things that I don't really remember how or where I acquired them.
Do you still do that? Are you still saving every receipt and every...
No, I guess it's just like it's different now because back then I had gone to a yard sale here or there, and now that's kind of all we do, and you do the same, that and offer up ads and stuff like that.
Not a lot of receipts in my world. It's all
there's not receipts, and at that point the best deals were at these stores because as you got from 94 and later, NES stuff stopped being as attractive, and N64, once that became the thing in the late 90s, it was definitely not attractive. NES stuff was just they were trying to blow that out, but I was so trying to buy up everything from my childhood that I'd either had to rent or borrow my whole life because I had Master System and Genesis stuff the whole time.
Is that a new shelf you got up behind you there? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm noticing, is that a new shelving unit you got behind you?
Back here?
Yeah, with the TurboGrafx and stuff? Is that...
Yeah, we had to implement a little bit of shelving over the TV here. My dad actually built that because he's just handy like that. And
hell yeah. It looks
did an amazing job on it, and it's kind of reserved for collector's items and stuff like that. I was hoping it would help relieve some of the pressure on the other shelving, but it's already full, so we already need more.
Yeah, I need a whole new setup here. I would like to get a hold of like actual movie store rental, like Dan. I don't know if you watch Rebel Gaming Club, but he got himself like an old Movie Time or a movie gallery rental shelf section that's built for holding DVDs, and it looks great. Like, it looks fantastic in the back of their setup now.
Well, you know, the Toys R Us's are blowing out all their fixtures and stuff, and I was looking at some of those. I mean, I wasn't really in the market for it, but anybody that is, you know.
Right. I would like to get a basket, like a Toys R Us basket, you know, that's a little blue basket. I don't really care about shelving units from them unless it's like a Nintendo shelf or something, but they're probably
right, something specific. And I didn't see anything like that. They were just like fixtures from that department, but they didn't really have any branding on them or anything.
Right. Those are all gone, I'm sure, by now anyway.
Yeah, there was really nothing there to speak of. But
is the one in Athens still open, technically?
It is, but there's really nothing left.
It's like a ghost town.
There's about 18 walls of 50-cent Skylanders, and that's it.
Yeah. That's sad.
Sad for Skylanders, too.
Well, sad for Toys R Us, because that didn't have to happen. That was I sent you that article about what exactly happened with them, and
if you want to touch on that for a second, we certainly can. I mean, enough's been said about it, but I think people need to look at it from not just a gamer's standpoint. I mean, I've been taking Molly there since she was born practically, and you know, it's just gone to where eventually there was still old stock marked 40% up over retail, and then they do this buy one get one 40% off. It's like not even, I mean, still not a deal, still not a sale at that point. That's why you're out of business, man. Well, and they were still pinching stuff. We went in there the other day, they were still pinches. Oh, it's only 40%. Dude, you're gonna be closing like 3 days. You couldn't sell it at that. You couldn't sell it at this. What are we doing? 80%. Get it out. You're not gonna get cost for this. Stop it. Freaking stop. You want to go home with 800 Zuzu pets? Because that's what you're gonna do. You can wallpaper your house with Zuzu pets.
Zuzu pets. No thanks.
Yeah, no thanks. Oh my God, the failed toys. And you know, I have that perspective, not that I'm something special, but just because of, you know, Molly's 10 years old, so over the last decade, I've been watching all these toys. Oh, here's something my kid might like. Oh, it's out of business in 2 weeks and it's in the bargain bin. That didn't happen when we were kids. I mean, these things came out based on cartoons and popular stuff, and they were around for years, you know. Stuff doesn't make it 2 months now.
No.
It was amazing to see a lot of the toy lines that were like, I don't even know what this is, and it obviously didn't sell because it's still here. And what is this? Well, it was kind of sad.
Saturday morning cartoons are no longer a thing, and I think that had to cut a hole in the toy sales industry itself. Of like,
it did. It had to.
How they sold toys in the 70s and 80s was they made cartoons of them, and the 90s they made cartoons, and it was hell. He-Man is built to be sold to kids because it was built for a cartoon. Like, they made a cartoon just to sell toy figures, and it's brilliant. You know what I mean? The lore of He-Man alone is depths, and in depth, just it's amazing how deep that show really is. And
I'm still blown away by the failure of the whole Toys to Life thing.
Yeah.
How do you mess that up? You took the golden goose and you wrenched its frickin' neck. How do you do that? I can tell you how you do it if you have a few minutes. But how do you do that? You start with Activision. That's how you do that.
Yeah.
When Skylanders came out, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the toy. You know, this is going to be it. I bought one. I wasn't going to open it just in case it turned into a $500 frickin' eBay hustle. Not that I want to be that guy, but I didn't know if we wanted that or not. And, you know, after a while, I was like, because I knew what it was. It was Spyro, and I know that plenty of people probably didn't at that point.
Right.
But, you know, Molly wanted to open it. She was just a little bitty at that point. So, okay, let's do this. And we had so much fun with it. And we bought all the figures, and it was fun hunting down the rare ones.
Spyro. It
was great to beat it. Then they came out with the Giants, and it was like, well, there had to be a sequel, so we're gonna let this go. It may not be as good, and it wasn't bad. I'm not gonna say it was worse. But then we come out with the Trap Team and the Claps Traps and the race cars, and oh my, stop! And it's not like it even did anything. In fact, when they did the Superchargers thing, and the reason I'm going to touch on that is because that's specifically what was left at this Toys R Us. Superchargers, which is like 3 models old now. When that was coming out, I said, oh my God. Skylanders is about to be a kart racer. We're saved. We've done everything there was to do with the other thing. And since y'all insist on Assassin's Creed in this thing and doing an annual gig with it, yeah, it has to have something new to it or people are going to quit buying the figures. So they got cars. Great. And then coming to find out it's not a kart racer and the cars don't do anything. Hell, the wheels don't turn. There could not be a more useless piece of shit for sale in the game. It has nothing to do with gaming. It has nothing to do with the game. It doesn't do anything.
That's pathetic.
Maybe it does, and someone can correct me, but I was informed from every retailer, no, the cars don't do anything.
Well, it's like those Disney Infinity toys, too. Like, I thought those would be huge, and they're just
well, and we're going to touch on that, too, because that was equally as hard to blow out, although they did end up blowing it out. And, Disney fans, I'll tell you, I mean, my wife bought a lot of the figures just to have, because they were, much like the Skylanders, very beautifully crafted.
Right.
But the game was a mess. We're a Disney household. I can't believe we're even talking about this on a Talking Retro podcast. Disney Infinity, my God. But it was a train wreck.
Well, we're talking about
that wouldn't finish. Glitch hang-ups, missions that couldn't be completed. It was just a bug fest. And that was the first one. Who cares where they went from there? I mean, these people just... Again, it's back to the people that make these things. I'm looking at Activision on Skylanders. They just pooped the bed. But
it happens.
On to some retro games. Let's talk about retro.
Let's go into the first topic you got there, buddy, while we're still waiting on our special guest, if he should.
I want to talk a little bit more about this Neo Geo handheld and what we can expect on that.
Now, is it a handheld or is it a tabletop?
Yeah, it's a little table. I mean, you can hold it. Handheld's the wrong word for it, but it's a little micro
mini cab, a little mini cab.
Well, you got you'll hook it up to your TV. It's got HDMI. It's an NES Classic essentially. It's just made out to be a little arcade cabinet. And we had talked about on one of the last podcasts about all the fake Neo Geo fandom, all the tryhards, the freaking YouTube fake lords coming out and acting like, oh, the Neo Geo. I was like, dude, no. Maybe you own one now. You didn't own one then. You're not nostalgic for it. Calm down. You're full of crap. But okay,
you didn't buy the Neo Geo X, which was a pretty cool system, to be honest with you. But even then, that thing was like, here's a ton of King of Fighters games, and that's about all we got for you.
I couldn't sell it to myself, and I was going to get a discount on it. I couldn't sell it to myself, and looking back, I kind of wish I'd picked one up just for novelty's sake, but it'd just be gathering dust. You didn't care about any of these games, and even the ones that were in the arcades, there were better versions of those games in that genre. There was no, I mean, it was Street Fighter 2, it was Mortal Kombat, King of Fighter. What? I mean, and that's why I want to talk a little bit more about this. Not about the fake fans trying to get attention, but about have you seen this game list? Have you seen this game list?
Did you print out the game list there?
Well, I mean, I hadn't really taken a hard look at it because I know what's going to be on it. King of Fighters and Metal Slug is the only. As soon as you try to argue about that's not going to be that great. Oh, but Metal Slug, yeah,
you can get Metal Slug on the Wii, dog.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it. I don't know how many different ways over here on things. Download. I've got an SNK collection on the, like you said, on the Wii. I'm pretty sure it's on there.
Yeah.
Whoop-de freaking do. I mean, you can say the same thing about the NES Classic. You don't need that. You've got all those games, but I am nostalgic for those, and I would like to see them in HD. Honestly, everything on this, I mean, God, the first 15 freaking games are King of Fighters. I didn't even know there were that many. I mean, was this Madden? Why did you have to make one of these every freaking year? I remember seeing these, and it's just never... None of the fighting games from SNK have ever really done anything for me. I've tried plenty of them in the arcade, but they never got more than a quarter out of me because
they're not terrible. They're just nothing to write home about.
They're nothing to write home about. And you keep going down this list, and I want to know who's nostalgic for any of this. I haven't even heard of half of it. Oh, because you're not a real gamer. I can hear him now, but I'm sorry. You don't have a boner for Top Players Golf or...
Yeah, fuck that game.
Top Hunter, what is this?
Baseball Stars is on there at 1 and 2. Am I wrong?
Roddy and Kathy, never heard of it. Shock Trooper. You don't have a boner for these. Quit acting like you have a boner for this stuff. It's not Zelda and it's not Mega Man. I'm not saying it has to be. I'm just saying I'm still interested in this. I'm still interested in this. I would buy this product. I would check it out. But
quit blowing up.
Call in on Molly's thing here, and I don't know why they're doing that.
But quit blowing up the fake nostalgia and the fake I'm so excited about this shit, and you're not. Go buy a real fucking Neo Geo. Go get a 6-slot arcade cabinet in your garage and see how excited you are to spend that kind of money to put the games in it. Just a bunch of, looking for clicks, talking about the topic of the day. And that's, we've talked about that many times on the podcast. It's neither here nor there. It's not what you're going to get from EmceeMur or CaptNRetro. You're not going to get the topic of the day. You're going to get the topic of what we want to talk about.
Well, I want to make it known that I would be a buyer on one of these things, depending on what the price is. Only because I would be interested in seeing what this thing can do. And
I'm guessing $200.
Well, I'm a collector, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh my God, Neo. I'm not that worried about it. I was that excited about the Nintendo consoles. I was.
Canadian Retro is saying it will be a reseller scumbag console. I'm guessing it'll be $200 out of the door. I mean, it's got a screen built into it, right?
We're getting there. We're getting to that.
A screen about as big as my iPhone.
The nail right on the head. That's what this is going to be. Pre-orders haven't even opened for this yet, but I see YouTubers that have them. So already we're starting down that. And don't call me a hater or any of that. I'm just saying that's what they pull with the Atari Flashback. All right. I pre-ordered that thing the minute it was announced, and people had them. People were unboxing them. And our release date, people that were actually buying these things straight up day one was getting pushed back, which is baloney because the thing already freaking exists. You just don't have the stock because apparently you sent them all out to a bunch of freaking YouTube tryhards for free. And I paid for one. Now, dadgummit, it ain't about no hate. You got my daggone money.
Right.
Give me my freaking system. That's all that's about. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that happen with a similar thing with this product. Oh, well, yeah, it's going to be a little bit longer. It's going to be a little bit longer, but people have them, but it's going to be a little bit longer. And definitely there's going to be scalping going on. You're going to have all kind of crap like that going on. And it's a shame because for sure the people buying these to scalp. I mean, and the thing is are they even going to know to do it? I guess the scalpers are always got their finger right there on the pulse, but it's not a Nintendo thing. So it may be a little bit more under the radar. It's hard to even gauge how much of a pull it's going to, because again, who is nostalgic for this? I don't see people lining up in the cold in the dead of winter to try to get these. I just don't.
Dat Game Collector says he wants one. I mean, again, there are people
Dat Game Collector, he's a collector. I'm a collector. You're a collector. I'd put it up here on the shelf and I'd be okay with it. But does the consumer really want this thing? I don't. I would think it's a kind of a tough sell, maybe. I mean, I'm ready for the Commodore 64 Mini, and I still have people ask me, what's that? What's a Commodore? People don't even know what that is, and that's fine. I can see where we are way past generations that ever would have had need to touch a Commodore 64.
You got a VIC-20 sitting up there in a box on your right-hand side. I mean,
and on top of it, a non-VIC-20 that's not in a box.
Exactly.
But I love the Commodore. That was one of my things.
They could do like I would like to see a Spectrum Mini. I think they made something generally along the lines of that over in Europe, and I don't have one, but I'd like to find one. Of things I didn't get to play. That's what I like. I do like the idea that Neo Geo is doing something like that and putting it out, but it's like if you're gonna put 30 King of Fighter games on there, what's the fucking point? You put one of every great game you have on it. You know what I mean? And then,
who's gonna revolt if you don't put those? Is my question. I know a lot of gamers. I network with a lot of people. I know maybe one guy that likes King of Fighters, and even he doesn't buy it religiously.
I mean, I'm not
Hav G's. I can't afford Neo Geo.
Speaking of Hav G's, he bought a stack of awesome stuff for me the other night, and
Hav is a trip, man. He's hilarious.
I hope his box got shipped in today. It should have gotten there yesterday or today, and he made a deal, man. I gave him a buddy price on some stuff, and I'm happy to do it. You know what I mean? He wanted it in his collection, and he knew where to go to get it, so we made a deal. You know what I mean? And that's what this is about. I love the little community we've joined here and we're part of, and you guys are awesome for hanging out with us tonight and joining the chat and being there. Everybody, Lucky Collector, Shadow, Dat Game, Roman Dan, whoever else is floating around in there right now. Mainly Gaming just showed up. I mean, again, I love Metal Slug too. It's a great game. It's the Contra. You know what I mean? Like if you want, it's the best looking Contra type game there is. Run and gun shooter, platforming shooter. It's super fun, but you can get it on 19 different systems. Do you really need to go buy another $200 piece of machinery just to play some Metal Slug, you can emulate.
Well, I just got tired of people. Every time I bring it up, the first thing that comes out of anybody's mouth is Metal Slug. Now, if that's really the only game you can pull out of your butt, that's like the Muhammad Ali of console exclusive titles or whatever. Just like, oh, I have Metal Slug, I have Metal Slug, I have Metal Slug, Metal Slug.
I mean, my go-to is always Baseball Stars, but yeah.
Well, what else has it got? Yeah, and I'll give you Baseball Stars. What else? 500 King of Fighters?
Uh-oh, looks like we got some a guest joining in here.
Again, I'm not trying to dog it. I'm just saying that playlist in itself that I'm looking at, it validates the accusation that the Neo Geo library versus the cost of that console, that's not a viable one. But yeah, if we've got HN in the house, we can certainly shift gears to some other topics here.
Is he there? I think I muted him. Hold on. Maybe I've
unmuted. I just got a notification.
I ruined it. I did not mean to mute you. Hold on. Are you back?
Okay.
What's up, Ian?
I was sitting there fighting with it. I'm like, what's going on?
I'm an idiot. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's
Welcome
fine.
to the show, sir. How are you doing?
Doing great, yeah.
That's a great way to do.
We've been talking about defunct toy lines and a little bit of Toys R Us news because the Toys R Us's that are still around us are just about to be done, I guess, being open for public consumption. And there's not much left. It's a barren ghost town inside those places. And then we got off the topic and we started talking about the Neo Geo Mini thing.
Before we shift gears completely, and while we got you here, HN, I want you to go ahead and weigh in on the Neo Geo, the library. We've been talking about how these people have all this fake gusto, on YouTube about how excited they are about a Neo Geo Mini, when it's like, dude, go back to the 90s. You didn't have a Neo Geo. Nobody you knew had a Neo Geo. Nobody you knew could afford a Neo Geo.
Yeah, like you'd have to know someone who had more money than sense who would buy Neo Geos back in the day. So they retail for what, $1,200 back in the 90s?
Something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember ads for like 700 balloons for this thing.
But that
I just didn't even think about it. Like nobody would pay. You didn't even. Santa doesn't love you that much. You're not getting that.
But yeah, the conversion on that is like $1,300 or something in today's money.
I have no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe it's just some people trying to ride that algorithm train. Whenever these new mini consoles are announced, they're just excited and overly ecstatic about these consoles. And then I played a lot of Neo Geo arcade cabinets back in the day, at random pizzerias and stuff like that. But I never in my life did I ever see an actual Neo Geo ever. And I've only seen one in a display cabinet.
Never, no. Yeah. And didn't really like it when I rented it. It just, we were also talking about, again, certainly played a lot in the arcade, but not long. There was I'm going back to Street Fighter. None of their games in the arcade, that really wasn't where SNK shined. I think SNK made some amazing stuff, but it wasn't that. It wasn't their arcade fighting games. Those did not grasp me. They didn't get any of my quarters after one or two. I'd move right on back to something else. It wasn't great.
Yeah, I always found for me, if I'm going to play an arcade game, I kind of want the authentic arcade experience, of going somewhere, playing, putting quarters in the machine. That's kind of me, I don't know, that's why I can never really get into home ports of arcade games.
I can dig it.
Yeah, I can dig that too. I do prefer my stand-up arcade cabinets to the home versions of stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, if the lineup is just going to be King of Fighters and the Metal Slugs and give me something I don't have or I don't already see on every other console, or don't give me anything.
Well, there's a grab bag of other stuff, but other than King of Monsters, I'm hard pressed to tell you what any of it is, other than just vague familiarity with the franchise names, and calling these a franchise is a stretch. Again, these are just, I guarantee you could take any of these people on there oh, the Neo Geo, and put them right there and say, all right, Neo Geo, what's this game? Draw me a picture of it. What kind of game is it? I bet they'd fail the test. It's what is some of this crap?
There's actually a great article in, sorry, my daughter is in the hallway apparently. There was a great article in, I want to say either Vanity Fair or another, actually it might have been whatever the one that covers stock reports most of the time. They were talking about the lucrative deal and world of Neo Geo cartridge trading, because apparently some of those cartridges for that system go for anywhere from $50 for some of the more readily available, all the way up to $10,000 for some of the more obscure ones.
Yeah. So
apparently it's a very lucrative collection that some people get into. There are some guys that, this one guy was in the article was quoted as saying he made $500,000 off selling his collection that his father had bought, just selling off the pieces of it.
And good for him. You know, we know one guy right now. I personally only know one person who's trying to collect for it, and that's Hav G's. And you know, if you got the money and you want to buy the things, that no one is telling you not to. We're just saying, like, don't act fake nostalgic for it on you.
Yeah. I mean, it should be every bit of intriguing from a collector's standpoint, but people are coming at it like, oh my God, it's got that game. It's like, dude, no, stop. Just stop.
Yeah, like when people talk nostalgic for like the Neo Geo Pocket, and like, you didn't have one of those. I never met a single human in my life that owned one of those.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we were on the same page on all that. Sounds like we are. So
well, you know, I grew up in a pretty big market for that. I grew up in California, where a lot of those games were dumped, and I never saw any of those.
Right. There you go.
Well, as you can see from the wall behind Historic Nerd, there are a bunch of Sega consoles on that cabinet.
Oh yeah, that one right there. Yeah,
he's a Sega man, and that's why Murr wanted to have him back and pick his brain on some Sega topics. So, you know, the Neo Geo, it's cool, but come on, don't act like it's the fucking hanging of the moon, because it's not.
Well, it's everything is with those kind of tubers, man. Everything hung the freaking moon because it's #1 trending.
I'm so sick of fake energy. Like, I'm always up and I'm always kind of me, but I don't ever go overboard and like, you guys, what's up? And like, the most annoying thing I've ever watched is half of the people that do that kind of stuff, and you can just see they're laying it on so thick, and like, but other people don't seem to notice it. They think that's how they are. And if you met that person in real life, they trust me, they're not like that. This is an act. And what you get with CaptNRetro and EmceeMur, we're not acting, bro. This is us. Anyway, so let's go ahead and go to the Sega topics. So stuff you wanted to talk with Ian about, since we got him here.
Well, you know, I've watched a lot of Historic Nerd live streams and thoroughly enjoyed them. And
Thunder in Paradise.
To name a few, I wasn't going to go there, but in particular, there was one in not too distant past of Virtua Racing. I remember that was really great, just great to see again, because some of those titles, and you know, I've got them, but they don't get thrown in too much. And you also did a hell of a piece on the whole Virtua, you know, chip and processor in general. That was extraordinarily interesting.
And the Sega 64.
Very so wanted to talk for a minute about Virtua games, because they were ones that I did a lot of play on both at home and in the arcades. Virtua Fighter, Virtua Racing. Do you have a preference on Virtua games as far as which ones were your favorite? You know, barring no genre, what were you the biggest fan of out of that whole lineup?
Virtua Racing. Because when I was younger, when the first time we got a Sega Genesis, we got the bundle pack, and it was during, like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but we went to the store. We were apparently going to get a Super Nintendo, but they were sold out, and we got the Genesis because there was blood and Mortal Kombat and stuff like that. So we got that along. And it was like this one thing where it was like a buy one cartridge, get a second cartridge free or something like that. And so we're like, hey, let's get Virtua Racing because it's pretty cool. And then you pretty much could pick out any other game. So we went around with that. So I always have a really fond memory of just playing Virtua Racing with the SVP chip on the base Genesis. And that always kind of blew my mind as a kid as to why there weren't more games in the Genesis that were like that. I mean, you had Hard Racing later that was really chuggy and kind of slow. But just Virtua Racing, just how fast. Sorry, I just had some dinner. But just how fast that game was and how fluid it was in comparison to, like, Star Fox always kind of just blew my mind. Like, I never actually saw the Virtua Racing arcade cabinet. Like, I never saw that one, which having seen it later in life, it's pretty astounding. And the SVP chip on the Genesis, I think, is kind of a fun little downgrade from that. But I absolutely always adored that chip and, like, the oversized cartridge that came with it. Because I did play Virtua Fighter on the Genesis, which was awful. The one that was that port that was just, like, really odd. Like, this isn't
really
Virtua Fighter. Yeah, in comparison to the arcade one we got. But yeah, nostalgically, I'm kind of really in tied to the Virtua Racing title.
Well, I played more of that in the arcade, and I can't even remember which one that I was at specifically where it was, where you could actually sit in the chair and play it. But I guess what always astonished me, like I said, once you got it home, the home version of that was delightful. Mm-hmm. It really wasn't that much of a step down, if if any. And I've still got that and Virtua Fighter both on the 32X, which did pretty good. But yeah, now that you mentioned it, the Virtua Fighter on Genesis, just those flat out 16-bit one, I didn't have access to that till much later, and I was never really exposed in that era at that time to how bad that was, and it was honestly shocking and dismaying to see. But I never really could pick a favorite between the two of those because I really did enjoy Virtua Fighter, even though those kind of games generally aren't my jam. I just really loved the characters in it. I always loved the way the ninja would squint his eyes at you when you'd pick him. He was so pissed. Everybody else would do this drawn out, animation, the best they could do at the time. But you hit the ninja and his eyes just narrow to slits. He's not saying anything. He's pissed.
See, what was really cool about Virtua Fighter when I was younger was that was one of the first like truly 3D arcade cabinets to really hit mainstream. And like you had some of the Atari ones that were kind of those weird trackball based 3D games, but Virtua Fighter was the first one that like you saw it everywhere when it came out. Like people were buying those cabinets, like you saw them in airports, you saw them in bus stations. They were just that cabinet was everywhere for whatever reason, and it was always really impressive to see that initially. And it was just a really cool graphical step, and then.
It was a big cabinet too. It was.
Oh yeah, it was a pretty heavy duty cabinet. And then what I thought kind of always was intriguing was I never really saw the Genesis or the Saturn version because Saturns just weren't big in my part of California. Like I only had one neighbor who had a Saturn, and like the entire area. And then 32Xs were practically unheard of. So I didn't see the 32X port of Virtua Fighter till much later. And even then, like the 32X port of the game isn't that bad. It still looks pretty good.
Not bad at all. I want to say mine came with it. I want to say it was packed in with it. There were a few different pack-in versions. It was that or Virtua Fighter. It was one of the or Virtua Racing. One of the, but I want to say it was Virtua Fighter came with it.
Yeah, because I have a 32X and its pack-in title was Doom. But yeah, it's very possible because in the Saturn, like its pack-in was Virtua Fighter 2, I think. So
well, I've got a box for a 32X up here where the pack-in was a Star Wars game.
Oh yeah, that probably was one of them.
That wasn't my original one, but it's the box I have for one. So.
Yeah.
But I did have a buddy with a Saturn, and he had Virtua Fighter, and then we started to see all those kind of games like Battle Arena Toshinden, and stuff that kind of tried to mimic that, and some of them did it well, some of them didn't. But eventually, I don't know that whole genre that didn't age that well for me, but still, the nostalgia will always keep me going back.
Yeah, definitely the first generation of 3D fighters has not done particularly well in terms of how good they are.
Well, just like hard driving, we played hours and hours of hard driving.
Oh yeah.
You turn that on today, it'll hurt your brain.
Try to play like because when I was doing that SVP video, I was like, oh, maybe I'll throw in some stuff about hard driving. And I was playing my copy. I'm like, oh my god, this game's unbearable.
It's the worst
I couldn't do it.
I rented hard driving almost like every week for like a few months.
Trying to get through the loop and not crash into the barn.
Or not getting through it, because crashing was great. I used to laugh so hard at the replays because they were just comical. It was like those simulations you do at the science center where it simulates being a drunk person in the car because it handled like a wet sack of shit underwater. It was so bad.
But it was
pushing the Genesis to get everything it could out of it.
Oh, yeah. It was doing everything it could to get out of it. And, like, the funny thing was I played hard driving, then I played Virtua Racing. And then after I got Virtua Racing, I never quite went back to hard driving. And I hadn't played hard driving in probably, like, 20-something years. And so going back and playing hard driving after playing the SVP version of Virtual Racing so much, I was kind of like, I can never go back.
Indeed.
That's cool. It was a console, it was pushing the limits of the console, but it just, even then I remember being like, why are we playing this so much? It's so difficult and stupid and terrible. And like, there's really no goal. I mean,
there's not. You just drove around like an idiot and tried to reset.
But at 13, when you can't drive a car, you're driving that car. You know what I mean? Like it felt like you were learning how to drive, even though, good Lord, if we had to drive like that in real life, I would just fly everywhere. And
I have a funny story that goes with that too, and I won't waste your time with it. But yeah, hard driving did have that effect that made you think you could drive.
Yeah,
you couldn't.
Especially if you try to drive like that on a real road, that's not a good thing.
I still really can't.
It's okay, officer. I was playing hard driving before you pulled me over.
Yes,
you don't understand. I have extensive training.
It's okay. I know what I'm doing.
There's a loop over here. I was going to hit it.
That'll be fine.
So I want to talk for a minute about a series that has been absent from the EmceeMur show for just a little while, but never has completely gone away. We are coming back to the Sega Did It Better series.
Okay.
And you're definitely somebody that can weigh in on this. And the whole gist of the thing was to show certain Master System games that were the counterparts or competitors to an NES rival that I really thought Sega just excelled at in every category in every way possible. And they're actually kind of hard to debunk. But what are your major thoughts on which Master System games outdid their NES competitors and why?
Let's see here. See, Master System isn't one of my strongest libraries to quote from, but in terms of the Master System just being a overall just superior system to the NES is just kind of a cool given, the fact that the Master System had Mortal Kombat, which I don't think the NES ever quite got, and it still looked pretty freaking great. It still looked pretty sharp on the freaking Master System, and
Sonic the Hedgehog too. Like it's got a bunch of great.
Yeah, it's got all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, so I guess in terms of how the Master System had kind of what would you say, slower versions of Sonic on it in comparison to the Genesis, for sure.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, that's not something that I've even touched on yet, the fact that it has so much, cross-gen stuff on it versus the fact that NES had very limited when it came to that. Yeah. So that's an amazing point when you look at it. I honestly hadn't even thought to. It makes you think for a minute, because there's games that are like, wait a minute, Enduro Racer, Excitebike, never thought to compare the two, but you almost kind of have to. Same kind of game, but Enduro Racer did it all, man. Customization, actual damage on the bike. You could trick that dadgum thing out. The stunts were better.
Well, yeah, you even had a... God, what am I thinking here? Why is the name eluding me? Once I gotta look at the title here. Oh my God, sorry, I'm having a stroke.
Do your thing.
Where's the title? Hang on, let me look at this.
It goes without saying.
There we go.
The
I mean, like this. It had something. Even the Master System had Space Harrier, something like the NES wouldn't even be really capable of doing. They had 3D World Runner in comparison.
That was one of the ones I've covered. We did that. Yeah. We've only done a few matchups already, but we did do Space Harrier and World Runner, and yeah, there's no comparison there.
NES had 3D Rad Racer, you guys.
Well, and I don't want to dog that, because I mean, World Runner's not that bad, but it's not. God, Space Harrier will make you literally have a seizure and fall out on the floor. I beat that for the first time in the 5th grade. It was 1989. I'll never forget it. One of my greatest moments in gaming. Not an easy game to beat. I mean, that's some white knuckle shit. But yeah, that's a prime example of it right there. Obviously, they were more capable in some instances.
They just had a better design system in terms of like. It had the advantage of coming a little later, but then again, it was also generational improvements over the SG-1000. So Sega had this nice experience with doing their own hardware and making these gradual improvements to where they came out with something that was pretty much, I'd say, like the base original Master System we got in the States was a more versatile system in the sense it not only could take the card-based games, but you could add in 3D peripherals. Because I know the Japanese Famicom had stuff like that never made it to the United States, but the Master System had the advantage of being the underdog, so they were kind of trying to throw a lot of other peripherals at it to see what stuck. And I would say like the light gun games on the Master System are probably comparable or maybe a little better. It depends. I mean, like if
I'll say better.
Say far and away better, and the phaser looks better. The phaser.
Oh yeah, the light phaser looks kind of cool. I've always enjoyed that. It also had that great tie-in kid TV show with it too.
Yeah,
pretty great. And then
when I was a kid, we didn't have laser tag, but we had the other one. I think it's called Phaser, and it looked like those guns. It reminded me of like, oh, is that the same gun as my laser tag gun? Which we always called it laser tag, but it was the off-brand Photon or something like that was what we played with. And off-brand laser tag guns. But
speaking of the show, if you've never watched the anime Zillion, it's freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
But you got the Zillion gun, first of all. I'm a big Carl Masick fan. Old Tatsunoko, that's off the hook to me. But I'll say better, and that's not a series we've gotten to. That's not a matchup I've gotten to in the series yet. Safari Hunt versus Duck Hunt. I love Duck Hunt. Don't get me wrong. I do. Really do. And God, Molly is so into Duck Hunt now. You saw her playing your play choice, Captain. She actually got to play in a Duck Hunt tournament at the Southern Fried Game Room Expo. She actually came in 5th out of like 30, 40 freaking kids. So
that's fantastic.
But Safari Hunt, dude, we ain't just shooting ducks. We got spiders, we got ducks, we got bears, we got cougars, we got orangutans, we got ninjas flying around. I mean,
Safari crazy fast in the back. Insanely hard to hit.
It came packed in on the certain systems. Now it's like it had
different. Yeah, it came with the pack-in titles. My Master System has Super Hang-On and Safari in it.
Yeah, that's what mine has.
Yeah.
And then there was other models that have different ones too. Like it's not just Safari Hunt and Hang On.
There's a Hang On Astro Warrior combo card that I also have.
See,
but mine did come with the Safari Hunt. But stages. It wasn't just the same stage. There was 3 different, maps or layouts. So again, they just what they did it better. I'm not trying to say in every instance they did, but
like something I would say too would be like Phantasy Star. One of the few like RPGs from that generation I'll actually go back and play is Phantasy Star. Like I never really cared about Final Fantasy or those ones, but Phantasy Star, for whatever reason, like the graphical tricks they would pull off in that game, I always thought like pretty innovative and always bring me back because it added extra nuances to the game, especially like fighting in the relatively faux 3D environments that they had for the caves and caverns. So definitely a more innovative idea, but I guess it kind of falls on Sega versus Square Enix, but.
And their Double Dragon is a 2-player version of the game.
Oh yeah, that's also a better version.
More styled after the arcade. And I don't ever want people to misconstrue that like I'm trying to dog on Nintendo because I love it just as much. What gets dogged on is the Master System. There are so many people that talk smack about the Master System because they've been told it's not the NES. They've never played one. They don't know anything about it. They're just repeating what they've heard. But it's their loss. They're missing out on one of the most underrated consoles out there. And if someone's not retro collecting for that, they're missing out. I know they can't have the nostalgia that I have for it necessarily, but that doesn't mean the great gameplay, the innovation, the advancements that were there versus what wasn't. I mean, it's there. It's there for you to enjoy. And, it really chaps my ass when people start dogging the Master System. Not that I'm getting triggered over it. It's just that if you have to say those kinds of things, you don't really know what you're talking about, and you're really telling on yourself. It's an indictment on how little you know about gaming to come out and say, oh, the Master System sucked.
See, one thing I find really intriguing is that the story of the Master System is kind of this great tragic tale of how Sega was like, we're going to break into the American market. We're going to do it. And we're going to get the guy who launched the NES in North America. We're going to get him, and he's going to be our primary market guy. So they brought him. I can't remember his name right now. I'm drawing a blank. But so they got him and they brought him into Sega. And he's like, I totally want to do this. What was that?
Todd Phillips, I believe. Am I wrong?
Maybe it might have been his name. But I have a book on the shelf behind me that has his name. And so they brought him on board. But then Sega of Japan got cold feet about launching it themselves. And they're like, you know what? We're not sure we can do this. Let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and partner with Tonka and get them to launch it. And Tonka just completely dropped the ball, despite the fact they were already a nationwide freaking distributor of games. They just completely messed up getting their console onto the shelves in stores.
And the market.
They got because every deal they could have made to make the Master System successful and get it in direct competition with the NES where it needed to be, Tonka just screwed up all those deals.
Howard Phillips. Howard Phillips is sorry.
Howard Phillips, I think, was the game master.
I thought he was the redheaded dude that was like the head of sales for Nintendo. Am I wrong?
I think Howard Phillips was the
captain talks out his ass a lot. So just know that.
No, it wasn't that guy because he was the guy that came he launched the NES in New York and stuff like that. So immensely successful, had a really good strategy. And when Sega got him, he was like, I want to do this. I want to take on Nintendo. I want to be the best because I know I can beat them. And then they completely were like, no, we're not doing it. So he was with Sega for a bit longer, and then he left, and then Tom Katz came on board and took over. And then, of course, we all know that he was fired, and then Tom Kalinske came in. So it was kind of like this really intriguing story about the Master System having this great potential start where it could have actually succeeded, but Sega shot themselves in the foot. And also that leads to another thing where like Sega tried to work with Atari as well to launch it. And they're like, hey, if you guys don't want the Master System, we will have a new console in like around 89. So Atari almost got the Genesis, but apparently the Trammels were dead set on getting global distribution rights, and Sega Japan was like, no. But really, really interesting stuff there about that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Sega is an American company doing business in Japan, right? Like they were a southeastern game.
Well, so how it worked was you had oh god, I'm trying to remember his name right now. Rosen, who was an American airman who basically went to Japan during the Korean War and realized he could make money using American photo booths because in Japan you need a photo ID for all kinds of stuff, and they were cheap and easy to operate. So he imported a bunch of those, and then he's like, oh, this is cool. And then another company, I think it was Sengoku Kichai Entertainment or something like that, came with him, and then they merged their companies and it became Sega Enterprises with David Rosen, that's his name, as the head of the company. So it was essentially this like American and Japanese company that came together because David Rosen was importing electromechanical games in the early 60s and 50s, basically, and then discovered the Japanese were really good at making those and started making them there and then importing them to the United States. So it was an American company kind of founded in Hawaii that shifted to Japan and then kind of stayed there and then merged with a Japanese company. So it was kind of this great amalgamation of both. So it had that kind of interesting power to it. So it has American and Japanese roots.
Okay.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Well, I've got one last Sega bullet point, and then I'll let you off the hook here. Okay. But this is one I always like to discuss, and it's one that gets brought up a lot, but it's almost like a PSA because I think people miss out on this a lot. Genesis RPGs versus the Super Nintendo RPGs. And maybe versus isn't the right word. I don't want to pit them against each other. I don't want to be in a world where I have one and not the other. But everybody gets so hung up on the Super Nintendo RPGs. Here's another thing they get geared to say. They say the Genesis didn't really have any of note. And again, and you already touched on Phantasy Star moving on into 2, 3, and 4 on the Genesis. They're missing out. Sega Genesis, still to this day, I am finding RPGs on there. I was like, I've never played this one. And I put it in, and I can't stop till I finished. I mean, years back, I put in something called, I think, Sorcerer's Kingdoms or something like that. I bought it for 99 cents somewhere. Had no idea what it was. Mind-blowing, start to finish, loved it, amazing RPGs. But these aren't the Chrono Triggers and the freaking Manas and the stuff that people talk about today. No one knows what they are. No one's heard about them. But I'm going to go right in on saying that Sega Genesis has as good as, if not better, RPGs in its library if people would just look. I don't know how much of an RPG guy you are, but I'm interested to know where you weigh in on that.
Definitely the Shining Force games are.
There you go.
A lot of the ones for Genesis that I recall fondly.
Shining in the Darkness, I played the hell out of.
So the funny thing I'm trying to think of, because when I think of the SNES, I only think of really like a handful of RPGs that really are of note. Because you have, the Secret of Mana, Chrono Trigger, and then the Final Fantasy games, and then Mario RPG. And that's kind of the only handful of those that I can actually think of for the SNES that are really of note. Where on the Genesis in turn, you had all the Shining Force games, then all the Phantasy Star games, with the exception of one, and then I'm sure there are others. I'm thinking like Landstalker was another interesting one that was kind of a faux mixture of the two.
Yeah, Landstalker's a cool overhead game, but it's an RPG.
Oh yeah. Or even like Fatal Labyrinth. That's not necessarily a
Beyond Oasis. I mean, there's a bunch of awesome games on there. This Sega collection that just came out has got a bunch of great stuff on it, but the online multiplayer sucks my balls, so it's not fun to play with your buddies.
Isn't that something? I couldn't believe that.
I can't believe how can you not make a 30-year-old game play just fine online when everything else, when you got Call of Duty abilities, you know what I mean? Like you can go in a lobby and play Call of Duty with all that shit that goes on in that, and you can't make a fucking 2D game work right.
I think it has to do more with the fact that collection isn't the emulator and stuff for it isn't new. They're just continually adding more shit into an existing product. So instead of optimizing it, like building it from the ground up, which they probably could easily have done for an emulator, they're just throwing more features into an existing program that might be already bloated and inefficient. So they just aren't optimizing it the way they should. But I don't know. It was nice for me because I'd already owned the Sega Genesis Classic for PC for like 2 years, and then all of a sudden I got new features and stuff for it. So for me, as a PC gamer primarily, it kind of paid off. But for console gamers in the newer generation, it's kind of a bummer that you guys are suffering for that. But I don't know, I would say, like, for me, Sega didn't seem to market their RPGs as like their front runners. They were always about like the action games, Sonic, some of their more fast-paced platformers. Where Nintendo had kind of a more balanced approach to how they were marketing their games, and I think RPGs were something that kind of led with.
That's a definite, yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of I'm trying to think of like any other Sega RPGs that are more of note. Because I mean, a lot of stuff was like in-house at Sega, just because they were a pretty good game development firm. But yeah, for sure, Sega was certainly innovative because they came from being primarily an arcade entertainment company that was still balancing their home console with their arcade hits. So they had that advantage where Nintendo pretty much once the NES dried up, Nintendo was like, yeah, we're kind of done with this whole arcade thing. And they kind of shut down their arcade division and just saw the home consoles being the future and end all be all of their company. Where Sega always kind of split their resources to where it gave Sega having an advantage of having these newer, fast-paced kind of ideas and these arcade games that they could cross over. Almost like how Atari was initially. So Sega certainly had advantages, but I mean, it was also kind of a disadvantage later in the sense that Sega was incredibly bloated because of all their different game divisions. But it's really interesting stuff for sure.
I just, again, going back to it's kind of a PSA because there's big names out there that'll come right out there and tell you Sega sucks at this or Sega sucks in general. And it's like, man, don't listen to people that say that kind of stuff. You know, you want people to get out there and make their own judgment on that stuff. And again, I'm not going to shortchange Super Nintendo. They had just as many fantastic RPGs, and a lot of which probably defined the genre a lot better than anything Sega put out, only for the sheer fact that you just mentioned they weren't marketed. So how could they? You know, nobody knew about them. But I just hope that anybody that's ever heard, you know, that a Master System sucks or Genesis didn't have RPGs or blah, 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 that they just take that with a grain of salt or whatever. And that, you know, these people that are wanting to be retro collectors, that are retro collectors, are still going to get after this stuff and give some hours, give some time to some Sega products. Get in touch with Sega software. That's what the brochure always said. You know, get in touch with it. Find out, pick a dadgum game you never played before that just looks intriguing and throw it in.
Yeah, so I find for myself, like just because I have more of a connection with Sega than I do with Nintendo. Like I have a pretty decent Nintendo library, but I find myself more often than not hooking up Genesis stuff just because I have more of a captivation with it because of how interesting it is.
Same here,
but it's just definitely a nostalgic connection. Nintendo has some good stuff. Like I'm not gonna knock it. I had an NES growing up. I didn't have a Master System. I didn't find out about Master System until much later, so I didn't have that advantage of checking that out. But once like the whole Sega Genesis Super Nintendo kind of war started, that was really fun. Just the whole just absolutely amazing marketing of just those two companies going head to head with each other. And I feel like you don't necessarily get that type of rivalry anymore. Or you do, but it always kind of feels forced to me. Like the PlayStation versus the Xbox is kind of like, it's not nearly as fun as it used to be. But that's just me.
It isn't, because and there's a lot of instances where one game on one and one game on the other, there's virtually no difference other than maybe some online functionality. I mean, the Master System was my first system. And again, I know that I can't expect everyone to have that same nostalgia for it if it wasn't theirs. But I still insist that there's some fantastic stuff there that if people haven't tried, they've got to get their hands on it and really see how much they dig it, because they're missing out.
But I knew that this topic kind of came up because of the GameSack tweet the other day about Sega Master System or Sega Astro System. Am I right? And like, I know they were kidding because they love all video games, but that it really put it in my head. Like, you know, the Sega Master System is a better machine in general than the Nintendo. Yeah.
I realized that was I realized what that was, but it also made me think of all the times that's been said and it wasn't.
Oh yeah, it was totally being.
I've had comment stuff, even in my stuff. I've seen comments in other people's, you know, Master System top 10 stuff, or just streaming a game or whatever, just running them through the ringer about what like there's some kind of war still to be fought. Like the Nintendo Sega war isn't officially over. Obviously, it is. It's like we're not still fighting that, man. At this point, just enjoy it. You know,
it's like Rainbow in the Woods. It'll never be over.
Yeah, it's over. You don't just turn it off.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't start this war. You started this war.
Who started this war?
We were just kids. I didn't draw blood.
Machines.
I didn't draw first blood. You did.
Keep it up. Parking cars.
All night long. I think I want to do a panel at a convention on just doing Rambo quotes.
We could.
That would be
moving fantastic. On from Sega, what do you guys got? That's all from me for that.
I picked up a Pokemon arcade machine.
That's a thing?
It's like a redemption machine. It's got a little wheel on it that looks like a Pokeball, and you spin it around and you move Pikachu back and forth, and there's a bunch of balls falling out of the top that you got to catch with Pikachu. And if you get 20 or more, it drops like a little toy down the hole. But I got it for super cheap, and according to eBay, it's worth a good bit. Let's flip it and turn it into something I really want. That's kind of the plan with that.
Yeah.
You have toys you can put in it.
It came full of toys. It's got all kind of different little Poke toys in it and different things in it. It had some of these. Actually, that's the only reason I mentioned. I just picked these up on the desk. These are like 50th anniversary Peanuts coins, 24 karat gold bronze coins, or plated bronze coins for the. I don't know how well you can see that, but Peanuts characters on it from.
Yeah, I can see
from 2001 or something like that. 2000 and it says 24 karat gold plated bronze. It's about an ounce. But it's got a bunch of those floating around, and it's got a bunch of actual like Pokemon toys in it too.
Crazy.
It's called Pokemon Catch, is what it was called. Pokemon Catch, and I just thought it looked cool, man. I filmed some of it. It'll be on an episode coming up this week of the stuff I picked up this week. But I'm going to Too Many Games. In fact, I just picked up my tickets for Too Many Games just now. I decided that I better buy tickets for it just in case I can't get tickets to it tomorrow when I go up there. It's a 12-hour drive to Philly, but we're going to make it happen like the captain does and go up there. And I'm going to get to meet DGC on Saturday and do some work for him and Murr. They got a trade going on. Something's going on. I guess Murr sent him a box of stuff, and I'm going to pick up a Sega CD box or something like that. Affirmative. So very, very cool.
Sega CD stuff. All right.
We'll get to hang out with some of the other friends of mine that'll be up there. It'll be good times, and I'm just take a box of stuff. I don't have a booth or anything. I'm just going to take a box of stuff to go make some trades and, have some fun, make some cash, and get drunk, and then come on back home on Sunday.
Not necessarily in that order.
No, not necessarily in that order. But that's what's going on in the captain's world. So yeah, Too Many Games is this weekend, and that should be fun. I was there last year. It was a good time. That's why I met Dan and the guys from Rebel Gaming Club last year. I ran into Sean Long up there too, and he was nice enough in person. I'll say that.
nice,
fantastic. So that's what's going on. And anybody got any questions in the chat there? Throw them out for any topic to discuss. Murr, you got any more topics? Topic wise,
well,
I just want
I could talk to you until the second coming of Christ. I've only got about 5 more minutes with you here, though, before I got to buzz out. But yeah, that was pretty much all the topics I had for that time frame. And HN, great to talk to you about some Sega stuff.
Yeah, good talking to
you. We've rapped in some of your live streams in the past, but first time face to face. So yeah, keep doing the vintage Sega stuff. I love watching that. And I got to say, anybody streaming those late nights, the first year that we've had Oliver, I've been up some really late nights with the baby. So people doing late night streams have really been my heroes for the last 2 years, because that's really given me somewhere to hang out in the middle of the night in the pitch black on my phone.
Krillin asks, what's the best deal you've made on an arcade cab or pinball cap?
Good question.
I mean, I got a Terminator 2 arcade out in the garage. I paid $50 for that thing. That's a pretty fucking good deal.
Yeah.
I've paid, I bought a couple different things. I got a Ghosts and Goblins for $100 and was able to trade that to that 501 Super Nintendo console that I've got out there with an arcade cabinet. It was a homemade type of thing that a guy put up on Facebook, and he wanted the Ghosts and Goblins. He had a Rygar that I really wanted to get a hold of, but he didn't want to sell that.
Ooh.
Yeah, our Rygar arcade is dope.
I like that little Taito one you had with Rastan on it and everything.
Yeah, I sold that to my buddy Josh. Josh, his kid is the kid that's on the 8-Bit Academy, which we haven't been able to do any episodes of that lately. The kid's been busy, and he's every other weekend type of thing with his dad. So when I do get to see Avery, we generally aren't playing games. We're all hanging.
You're dropping out of school, kid. You're playing video games.
He's really good at them though. He's a trick shot master on like the Call of Duty games, and like he's got his own little channel. Discreet gaming, I believe is what it's called. And it's, doing no scoping off the top of roofs, back flipping off of a car, you know, while you shoot somebody in the face. And it's a bunch of cool clips like that. And I was like, you know what, kid, I want to see what kind of skills you got in the 8-bit world. And he had never played any of these games, you know, really never touched anything old. So we make him do like we did when we were kids, which is you go over there and look at that stack of games and you pick out one you think would be interesting based on its cover. And he picked Ghosts and Goblins, I think Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. He got knocked out by Glass Joe in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, which was the very first episode of it. And that had me cracking up watching him play that and not telling him any secrets or tips. You know what I mean? Like, just figure it out. No, there's no manual here. Just figure it out. And then he
remember, you don't have the internet either.
Then no internet. Yeah. Then he went with Ghosts and Goblins next. And that one super frustrated him. And I was like, see what I mean? This is what we had to do. Can you imagine paying the $5 you made that week as mowing lawns to go rent that game and coming home and having to sit with it for 3 days? Fuck that.
So I remember like the worst rental experience I ever had was when my buddy and me, we paid like an extra $3 or something like that to have Superman 64 for the entire weekend.
Oh.
And that was
what a weekend.
God, that was just the worst fucking weekend in terms of just playing that game. I still don't think we beat it. I think we got locked up somewhere in the game and just gave up. But yeah, I guess, God, I used to love that. Like, you go to the video store, pick out the game based on the cover. Like, I remember renting the Ghostbusters NES game. Just going like, oh, it's Ghostbusters. This cover looks awesome. And then be like, what is this?
Why would they do this?
Diarrhea.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with the Sega Master System's Ghostbusters is no better. I mean,
no,
let's not kid ourselves.
Never knew what in the world.
If you're going to do it, Sega did it better with that game. You can just be like, they both suck. And that's the whole episode. Just
That's you know, we may give that 30 seconds. Yeah.
But the Ghostbusters on the Sega Genesis is incredibly fun. And, you know, it's a really good game. That's a really good game.
Well, man, I got to dip on out of here. I'm out of time, but thanks so much as always for having me on. Great talking.
Yeah, good talking to you.
Yeah, man. And HN, we appreciate you stopping back in again. I know Murr wanted to pick your brain, and I'm glad y'all were able to do that. And now we can all be friends. Hooray.
Well, and let me clarify. If y'all want to keep going, you know, you don't stop on my account. I'm just out of EmceeMur time for tonight. So,
well, I was going to say, I got a couple more things to do around here on the house. I've been really working on this pinball machine all day long. And when you called me earlier, I had forgotten that we said we were going to do a stream. You know, I was knee deep and scraping off vinyls and stuff off the top of the play field. So I'm going to go finish that up, and then I'm going to get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and then I'm going to drive my silly ass to Philadelphia tomorrow. So we might just call it. And I may end up streaming a little bit of pinball again tonight. I have an urge to play. You know what I mean? Every day I want to play the damn thing. So I might as well stream it. But if I don't get some real sleep, the drive's going to be a bitch. So.
Indeed.
But yeah, Ian, we appreciate you coming back on, man. And anytime you want to chat, you're always welcome. DGC, you're welcome to come back on again too. We're chasing the classics. Brad, I want to get you on here one night. I know CMRetro is scheduled to be on sooner or later.
Great.
We can't thank you guys enough for hanging out and watching our stupid show and listening to my ranting and raving and Murr's ranting and raving, because he is the best at the ranting and the raving.
I don't mean to be.
He was saying earlier today that, you know, he doesn't want this always to be something that he's complaining about, but like, if you got something to complain about, this is the forum for it. You know what I mean? YouTube is about complaining and fake hype for things.
The airing of grievances.
Yeah, exactly. And falling down videos and people who can't sing. So that's we can do that.
That eat kittens.
But remember, I would suggest you
every other video talking about the Switch and/or Atari VCS.
Yes, make sure you make an Atari VCS video this week.
Make sure you get that out.
That's I know you got to go, but speaking of, can we just, for the record, on live camera, say, quit calling it Atari anything? It's some random ass company that stole the Atari name and they're paying for it to use it. It is not Atari. It is not the Atari we all know and love. It is someone else co-opting it and ruining it. And
you kind of have to call it what they named it, but yeah, you need to make sure that people don't understand that Atari is dead. And it's going to remain dead, and it's not alive now. So,
do you think if they spent like $500,000 and got Nolan Bushnell back involved in the project, do you think that would legitimize it for you guys, or
no? You need
no, it wouldn't.
You need
the Indiegogo thing that does it for me. I don't do business that way. It wouldn't matter
fair enough. What it was. Like, yeah, I'm in the same boat in the terms of like, yeah, I'll look at it when it actually comes to retail, but as far as giving you money without even seeing a product necessarily, it's kind of crazy. I always love the thing that's been kind of driving me nuts about the Atari VCS like ad campaign going up to it is every video they've made about it has been the worst low energy collection of nostalgic brief clips I've ever seen. I'm like, yeah, I get the console has a pretty design, but you guys are so low energy about it. You're not even like trying to channel any of that Atari gusto that it used to have in the 80s with some of those great commercials like Have You Played Atari Today and stuff like that. I'm like, there's so much more material there you could play from.
The Jack Black Pitfall commercial.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would say, like, they're making their ad campaign like how I make videos, very slow and just kind of documentary-like. I'm like, why are you doing that? Why not make it more interesting? Why not tap into those other branches of nostalgia that people are kind of wanting? Yeah, I don't know. I'd be more interested in that personally, but I felt like sharing.
Yeah, and I watched a game. I sent it to Murray the other day, but a guy was playing on the Game Beaters channel. He was playing a brand new, I don't know how brand new it is. I call it brand new, but it was Mega Man 2 on the Atari 2600, and it was fucking insane. Like the music, it all sounded like it was coming from the original chipset. It was an emulated game, but like it was playable and looked amazing. And had Atari stuck around or been able to like do platforming games like that, I maybe would be more of an Atari fan.
What's really interesting is the 2600, the Stella chip in there is actually the same chip that you have in the Famicom later.
Really?
So like, yeah, I mean, like I think it was a little more modified, but essentially, if the Atari programmers had stuck around and learned more about the system, they could have gotten a lot more out of the 2600.
That's great. Like if that game would have hit, and you know, again, Atari wouldn't have crashed like they kind of did in the early '80s there for the video game crash.
Well, I think honestly, like the video game, like it was on it. The way Atari was doing business in that point in time, like that type of a market collapse was unavoidable, just based on how all those companies were treating those. It was just the fact that they were pushing these consoles out the door, and they had little to no market capital backing them up. And as soon as they stopped selling, they're like, the companies were like, "Oh my God, we're going into these massive deficits." But
right,
but yeah, I would say like the video game crash wasn't necessarily that destitute wasteland that people like to paint it as. Definitely, like Atari ate dust and pretty much collapsed under their own financial weight because they were too expanded and didn't have enough capital to survive the decrease in game sales for that brief period of time.
And didn't do what Nintendo did, which was quality control.
Well, yeah. Ultimately, like what ended up happening was, I think Atari didn't have the advantage of having a lockout chip or anything like that, like Atari or like Nintendo. And so Atari was like, they just suffered from this gluttony of garbage just flooding the market. Because I think there's actually this really interesting graph somewhere where you can see just the number of Atari games coming to stores weekly, and like that number was like doubling the longer the system was on the shelf. So by the time you got to like late 1982, at the beginning of that crash in '83, you were getting like 100-something new titles of like a month or something like that for the Atari. So there's no way any game could possibly keep that system afloat and not just bankrupt the company.
The Wii shovelware technique, which is just
towards the end. Yeah.
Let them.
I gotta run, guys. I'm gonna dip on out of here.
All right, buddy.
Yeah.
Keep it rocking.
All right, man. We're gonna go ahead and call it a night then, I guess. I know I got some stuff to do. I'm sure you do too, Ian. But again, thank you so much for joining us, and you guys out there in the crowd. Thank you guys for hanging out and watching the show. And we'll do it again next week. We'll have some Too Many Games stories and some different stuff to go on for that show, and we'll have a great time. Thank you guys so much.
Always a pleasure. Catch you later.
All right, buddy.